Amphibia is a show that often gets overlooked in the discussion of best animation. However, in my opinion, it is the best due to these key reasons. However, not everything is without flaws. Not everything can be perfect, can it? Hi, I'm Micah, and this is why I believe Amphibia is a near perfect show. But wait, didn't I already make this video? Well, a while back, I made 3 video essays on animation, and they're serviceable. However, they don't really reflect where I am as a video editor right now, which was the entire reason I made them. Well, now I'm remaking, re-editing, everything in those videos, and even finishing that final part in order to achieve what I set out to do all those months ago. Without further ado, let's get started. About the show, it's important to get a little background information. Amphibia first aired on the Disney Channel in 2019. The show follows Anne, Sasha, and Marcy, who are all trapped in Amphibia. The show specifically follows Anne, who gets taken in by the Planters, a frog family consisting of 3 frogs, their grandpa-father figure Hop Pop, the young frog Sprig, and the tadpole Polly. The show was made by Matt Brawley, a former storyboard artist on the show Gravity Falls. The show was meant to be Disney's next Gravity Falls, per se. That's not saying it's trying to be Gravity Falls, it's just saying it was meant to fill that role, because let's be honest, the former attempts did not do such a great job. Yeah, people didn't really like those. Amphibia was honestly a perfect successor, and it's Disney's best attempt so far.
What about the Owl House?
What's so true?
Now, that's not to say Amphibia was trying to be Gravity Falls, it's still doing its own thing, but it still fills in that same kind of role that Gravity Falls film, being a show following some main characters who get taken out of their normal environment, placed into a newfound family environment. Yeah, I covered all that briefly in an older video that kind of sucks ass, but you get what I'm saying. Now, while Amphibia hasn't hit the same place culturally as Gravity Falls, the show still holds up arguably better than Gravity Falls, and it has very little that I think needs to be changed about it. If you want to know what I changed about Gravity Falls, go to watch this video right here. Now that that's out of the way, let's begin with the good stuff. You know what, I wanted to very briefly talk about the animation in the show, because this has to be some of the best animation I've seen out of all of these shows. On screen right now are some of the clips I'm really thinking about right now. I have to say, the use of their animation techniques is astonishing. You really know when something important's happening, because the animations will switch from your standard onto the more character-focused animation on one. So instead of movements looking like, you'll get more animations like, you know, I don't know if that gets the point across. So this video is 60 frames per second. If I wanted to make an animation of this, which would be very not standard, I wouldn't want to animate it every 60 frames. I'd animate every other frame, and I'd animate 30 frames per second. So you end up getting something that still looks fluid, but it also takes a lot less time. And you see films like Spider-Verse doing this technique on purpose just to kind of get you that on-paper feel and just get more stylized animation. But what it needs to animate on ones would be if I were to animate all 60s of those frames. How do you know I'm not doing that right now? So the point is, they save this type of animation for the really important moments. So not only is it more memorable, it's more impactful, and it saves Disney a fuck ton of money, which we all know they care about a lot. Now, while I did go and talk about all those techniques and stuff, as you can tell, I'm not an animator, so I'm not the expert here. You probably have to talk to an animator about that. But I can tell you, this looks really fucking good. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to our next main topic. Amphibia, like many other shows, spends a long time building up the world environment around them, and yet it explains so much while leaving behind so much mystery. Right out the gate in season 1, it's made very apparent that the cast has been played. Let's break it down like this. Frogs are the working class. They make the produce, they run the farms, they do the mailing system, they do all your basic run-of-the-mill jobs, and while a few of them here or there are very much upper-class citizens or CEOs of big corporations, though they're the exception and not the rule. Frogs typically make up the majority of the population on the continent. And I know that because here's the map of Amphibia. Right here. Now, these are all the frog villages, and probably a few over here. Now, while at one end of the spectrum we have the frogs, at the other end we have the newts. The newts are the nobility. The newts make up the majority of staff of the King's Castle. They primarily live in this area over here, which is the capital. They run the academies, and they run the more prestigious, higher class jobs. While newts aren't very much introduced until season 2, we get to meet 2 of them in season 1, and they both brilliantly demonstrate the newts as the upper class. The first one I will talk about is Albus Duckweed, who was introduced in the 7th episode of the show. And while he was introduced in episode 7, he didn't actually do anything until episode 9. But in episode 9, he's shown to be the town's top food critic. And he is very, very picky and uptight about the way he likes his food. And while I boldly claimed in my last video he speaks with a transatlantic accent, that's not the right term to describe it, but the point I was getting at is his accent is very much fancier than the rest of the townsfolk. I mean, here's a comparison.
Yes, there's only one fly in my soup. There should be dozens. I mean, how hard is it to run a restaurant anyway?
There be a problem, sir.
That is Albus Duckweed.
I don't feel safe.
This brilliantly introduces Newt to us as having more of an upper class aesthetic, because this Newt speaks way fancier than the rest, and he's much pickier about his food, and he cares way more, and he's got a much more, I guess, high-esteemed job than the rest of the frog, which very much plays into this caste system, even if it's a little bit more subconscious than the rest. The only other Newt we meet in Season 1 is Traitonio, and Traitonio is a real character. Traitonio speaks with a very fancy Spanish accent. Later in the show, he's said to be one of the top Newt strategists, and while that is heavily debatable, he's still very, very fucking smart, and he knows how to plot a train robbery really fucking well. Even then, he's still shown to be much smarter than all the frogs and toads running the trains, and he still fits into the caste system neatly, even if it isn't necessarily one-to-one. Lastly, we have toads, and toads were first introduced to us in the very first episode, right at the end, with specifically the character of Captain Grimes. While there's other toads shown in the first episode, they aren't really necessarily important for understanding the characters. The point I'm trying to say is that Captain Grimes fits the toad stereotype one-to-one in this episode. As well, this is true about all toads, or most toads. The toads have a very different aesthetic to the frogs and newts. They have a much more detailed, bumpy aesthetic, and their eyes tend to be glowing more often than not. While this is true for some of the frogs' background characters, for the most part, other than with a few major exceptions, the toads typically, more than not, have those lifeless purple eyes. And it really demonstrates their warrior culture with just these design choices. And that's something that Amphibia does so well, and something that I really have issues with some other shows that I will talk about later. While there are other types of species in there, those who fall out of the rule set, not really important for understanding the rules of the world, because as I said earlier, they're the exception and not the rule, and they also aren't introduced until much, much later on. And the point is, this whole caste system is the pillar for the main external conflict of this show, and it just shows just how well Matt Brawley understands the concept of world building. I mean, there's so many questions about this world to discover. I mean, there's literal robot factories in the world where electricity hasn't even been discovered. You got the intro with the box with 3 stones, 3 girls, 3 flashes of light, then Anne's eyes in that same episode then flash the color of one of those stones. You got so many mysteries of the show, and even the caste system. Was it always this way, and how the fuck did it get to this point? There's so much to discover about this world. While they explained so much of it, it still feels like they left so much behind, but in a good way. Setting up a world and universe like this is very difficult to do, and something that not all Disney shows really get to do well. But what's the point of making a good world if you got no characters to put in it? The characters in the show are insanely well written. Each main character fills a role, and every character that's introduced serves at least some role in the story. I mean, Matt Brawley follows the role of Chekhov's gun to a T. To begin, let's look at the frog side. First off, we've got Hop Hop, who's the Grunkle Stan type character. Like Stan, he's a very suspicious character who's got a lot of mystery to him. However, unlike Stan, he's also an overprotective parent. While Stan cares about different people, he is not that overprotective parent, if you know what I mean. But it makes sense why Hop Hop is this way, because spoiler warning if you saw this video be spoiler free for some reason, but the reason for this is because he feels responsible for the death of Sprig and Polly's parents. He was too late to stop the Herons from destroying their home and killing their parents, and as such, he feels like if he had gotten there just a little bit earlier, he could have done something. Because he couldn't save Sprig and Polly's parents, he feels the need to protect them in order to save them from any danger. Next up, we have Polly, and Polly's like your stereotypical young baby character, you know, super violent baby, ha ha ha. But Polly is a little bit more than that, not that much more than that. She's not super important for the overall story, but she's still important. Polly's the only reason they were ever able to tame and control Frobo, and Frobo leads to some pretty damn important plot points. And while that doesn't seem like much to someone who hasn't watched the show, it's still a lot, and Polly's still a very fun character who still serves a minor but significant minor role, if that makes sense. Next up, we have Sprig, and Sprig is Anne's first true best friend. Sprig is the first person to actually sit down and listen to what Anne is saying and actually work with Anne rather than using Anne to get what they want. Sprig is a catalyst for and fixing her relationship with her close friends, because Sprig is the only way she learns how to have an actually healthy friendship. As well, Sprig in many instances serves as a stand-in for the audience. If, let's say, a former character who betrayed them comes back, or there's something suspicious about a new character that's coming from an old interaction, and just voicing the general concerns of the audience, or even just summarizing the events of the past few episodes, just to, like, you know, get you filled in if it's been a while between episodes. While there's a lot of frogs to talk about, there's one more that I want to touch on, and that's Wally. While this might seem like a curveball to those who actually watch the show, let me explain. Wally is essentially the foil to Anne. Like Anne, Wally does not fit in. However, unlike Anne, Wally wears that with flying colors. On the flip side, Anne is very open about her personality with her parents, whereas Wally is not. And through each other, they are able to learn how to be more open about themselves and also be more comfortable with themselves, which is pretty much Anne's main arc in the show, and it's only possible because of Wally. They aren't antagonistic at all, despite being opposites of each other, but rather they are, by definition, foils. Characters who are similar in many ways, but differ in one or two key aspects. Looking at the Toad side of things, we didn't get very many Toads in the show, but the ones that we did get do serve very important purposes. First off, we have Grime. Grime as a character started off as your typical angry, antagonistic, I don't care for my soldiers who are incompetent type character, because, well, the soldiers were incompetent. Because of Sasha, Grime ends up growing into his own character who learns to care for his soldiers, and even goes through a period of time where he's washed up and can't do shit. And after growing out of that period, he becomes the strong military leader he was before, but now with a caring new personality. Next, we have Percy and Braddock, and while being two separate characters, they still fill the same role. Percy and Braddock stuck with Grime and Sasha through thick and thin. When Toad Tower fell, when Grime was a fugitive, through literally everything. They even went along with all their plans, despite not really wanting to be in the military. But it came to a head when Sasha didn't listen to their needs after she said they would, and that was their last straw. And they leave, and they don't come back for the rest of the show, not even in the finale. They are the primary example that in this show, your actions have consequence, and sayings don't go back and reset to status quo in the end. Lastly, with the Toads, we have Beatrix, and Beatrix just kind of steps in to fill the same role Grime did after Grime kind of reformed. She ends up taking over as the main leader of the Toads from this point forward, and she's still important to the story, but less so. She's just kind of like, what if Grime never reformed? Because I already covered so many of the news, and because this is already a very long video, let's just cover one. And that one is gonna be Andres. See, Andres is almost a foil to Marcy. When we first meet Andres, he's seen as like this goofball, fun-loving Santa character, but we learn it's a lot more sinister. That's not to say that's not his personality. It is, but the same with Andres is that he fell into manipulation of his dad in the core. Or I guess the core it's weird, it's complicated. But he pushed everyone away, trying to control everything. Marcy, in many ways, reminds Andres of how he used to be with Lisa, and also Marcy reminds him of. Had he not gone down the path he did, Andres probably would have turned out a lot more similar to Marcy. Lastly, we have the humans, and the humans are all unique. While they call each other friends, that's not the best way to describe their friend group, because it is a very toxic relationship. Let's look at Anne. Anne is constantly being pushed around by her friends, going along with whatever they want her to do because that's what her friends are doing and that's what her friends are telling her to do, so she must have to do that, right? She doesn't really know what she wants to do with herself, and that's it. She doesn't really care about herself. Throughout the show, we see her grow into her own person, and she's able to take charge, unite people, and she figures out what she wants for herself. Sasha, on the other hand, is a very similar character to Grime. He starts out as a very aggressive and manipulative person. She's the reason Anne never went home that day. She's the reason Toad Tower fell. She's the reason Andres was able to take power. She caused so many problems in the show. And when she finally realizes that she needs to grow, she does. And she makes an actual change for the better. Sasha was able to reconnect with everyone from her past, and she made amends for her actions. Probably is the most drastic character arc in it. Last, we have Marcy, who is too focused on her own needs and wants and keeping things as typical status quo. And as such, she got them trapped in Amphibia intentionally. She didn't want to end up alone, and as such, she set up all the events in the show in motion. She's very clumsy and she gets lost in everything she does, and she ends up causing more problems than she solves. But in the end, she matures and is willing to go through the move that causes the events of the show in the first place. While she doesn't have the most drastic arcs, that's not to say she doesn't have a significant role in the story. The story of Amphibia is brilliant, and it ties together everything so well, and I just love this show. I'm about to glaze the hell out of it. It's one of the few endings that only gets me truly emotional. Even just thinking about it, I can see it right now. But it's also one of the few endings that changes the context of everything leading up to the start of the show. Because they accounted for every last tiny detail. Wait. Before we continue, this is where the bulk of the spoilers are for this episode. So if for some reason you want to stick around, even though I've already given multiple spoiler warnings, click to this time to skip ahead. Although, to be honest, I don't know how much more video there is if you skip ahead, but here's the time frame to skip ahead. Alright, now that they're gone, let's get back on with the video. Alright, let's take it from the beginning. And when I say the beginning, I mean the beginning. In ancient times, there was a kingdom that gained resources and power from conquering other worlds. They would do this through a music box known as the Calamity Box. This era is known as the Golden Age of Amphibia. The last prince of this era, Prince Andreas, was assigned his first mission with invaders. He was very excited and he told his friends, Beryl, a toad, and Leaf, a frog. Leaf and Andreas are very close friends, to the point where they have a secret way of communicating, using red notes that look empty, but when viewed with red glasses, they reveal the hidden text. He showed them both the key to the box and the box itself. When Leaf accidentally touches the box, he has a vision of the future, in which there was a moon coming to destroy all of Amphibia. Distracted, she took this information to King Aldrich, demanding they stop the use of the box immediately. However, the king refused. Leaf decided to take things into her own hands, stealing the box and running away. Both Andreas and Beryl failed to stop her, and as such, Beryl was punished and sent off to be a toad warrior. And Andreas, being a racist little newt, decides to punish all the frogs by making them lower class. And let me just say, if Andreas wasn't too busy trying to be a World War II dictator, I mean, the plot of the show would have just turned out so differently. Like, goddamn, bro, like, one frog stole the box and he punished all of them? Like, that's crazy, bro. Come on! Let's take a second to pause, because already we are starting to see the themes of the show starting to develop. While this isn't where the show actually begins when you watch the show, I decided to start here because this is where it starts chronologically. But the first theme that's glaring us right in the face is friendship and trust. Andreas lost all his trust in his friends, and he took his anger out on everyone else. He didn't know how to deal with a situation like this, and as such, he took it a little bit too far. If he was more responsible and followed the requests of Leaf, it would have been better for all parties involved. When Aldrich finds out about this, he isn't that concerned, because he knows his own prophecy of 3 stars.
Stars burning bright, come from beyond to expel the night. Should they fight or embrace the fall, their choice will determine the fate of all.
So he knew the box would return at some point, but he had no idea when. Around 1,000 years later, Marcy would discover that her dad is getting an out-of-state job. Not wanting to move out of state and leave her hometown, she passes by a thrift store where she spots the Calamity Box, which she had read about earlier in a book, and ooh, the theorists are gonna love that. Knowing what the box could do, and knowing it was her friend's birthday, she decides to send a picture of the box saying, it's the perfect gift for Anne because Anne hates frogs. At around the same time, Anne and Sasha had been out all day skipping at school when they get the text from Marcy. Anne wants to go home because her parents are throwing a surprise party for her. However, Sasha pressures her into going up and meeting with Marcy. They do so and end up getting trapped in another world. Again, we're seeing more and more of the scenes starting to develop. First off, we have a new one. That things change. Things are constantly changing and evolving, and it's one of the biggest scenes of the show. Second, we see the scene of friendship return. She wants to please her friends, but she's just going along with what they tell her because she feels powerless. She just wants to do what's easy and coast through life, but that doesn't work. You can't just do what everyone tells you to do because you want to maintain a relationship with your friends. But if that's how you're going about maintaining your friendship, are you guys really even friends? After getting sent to Amphibia, each person gets trapped in a different place. While all the events for Marcy are detailed out, I'm only going to cover it once in the show. Because let's be honest, who reads the third-party material? I mean, who the fuck would buy that? To begin, Marcy lands directly in the middle of Utopia in the King's Palace, and then falls down the flight of stairs. There's the bad luck. There, she meets King Andreas and befriends him. On the other hand, we have Sasha, who landed about here in the swamp, and gets immediately imprisoned by all the toads. Last, we have Anne, who I think lands about here, where she lands in an elephant forest, where she has to live in a cave for an extended period of time. Which, let me just say, imagine just chilling on your birthday, mind you, in the middle of LA, and then all of a sudden, you open a box from a thrift store, which you stole, and all of a sudden, you're now in the middle of a fucking forest, and you're living in a cave on your birthday. I mean, goddamn. Eventually, Anne has to eat. So on her hunt for food, she encounters the town lunatic, Wally. Now, Wally, because he's a little reports this to the town, and this starts a beast hunt. Freak Planter, a young frog, is the first frog to find Anne after falling in one of her traps. He befriends her and they bond and all that stuff when the rest of the town is up and all the shit you'd expect out of one of these ensues, and in the end, Anne gets taken in by the planter. And now you see, Anne is one in possession of the box, and after a little bit of living with them, she decides that she trusts them enough that she shows them the box and hopes to find a way to get home. Hop Pop then reads in the family tome that the box is dangerous. So, about a month of them being to Amphibia, and Anne can't leave the valley because of this big-ass ice wall. At this point, some tax toads come up to take taxes for the village. They approach Anne about helping them collect taxes, and Anne, looking to earn some respect, as she is treated like an outsider, decides to help them. Throughout the entire collection, something seems off. When they get to the planters, Anne knows that they paid their taxes, and having her last straw, stands up to the tax toads. They eventually discover that the mayor stole all the money, and everything is sorted out. But this whole incident earned Anne the respect of the village. Meanwhile, at Toad Tower, Sasha has been constantly convincing Grime's soldiers to become deserters, when 2 herons attack. Grime, who had previously imprisoned Sasha, realizes the potential she has as a commanding officer after she helps him regain control of his army. They get a report back from the tax collectors of the Human and Frog Valley. They make plans. Fast forwarding a bit, Anne's been busy. She's been doing research, she got combat training, Hop Pop ran for mayor and won 100% of Wartwood, but lost everywhere else in the valley, which is a whole affair. Hop Pop buried the music box and gave it to his contacts. Hop Pop mind controlled half the village, this weird mushroom guy, and Anne's been voted Frog of the Year. Suddenly, in the middle of the celebration party, Sasha shows up with the entire Toad army. She and the Toad army are there to invite the frogs to a banquet. The frogs go, and when they arrive, Sasha reveals her plans to Anne. Revealing the banquet is actually a plot to execute Hop Pop, as Hop Pop has become a political figure symbolizing the downfall of the Toads because of the whole mayoral escapades. Obviously distressed by this, Anne leaves, and one thing leads to another, and all of a sudden they're on top of Toad Tower fighting over Hop Pop. In this moment, Anne finally stands up to Sasha and wins the fight. In all this chaos, Toad Tower explodes due to Wally's scheming, I guess we'll call it. Sasha nearly falls off. Anne tries to save her, but Sasha, realizing Anne has true friends now on the plantars, lets go and nearly falls to her death. However, Grime saves her before she hits the ground. We see the scenes here really fall into place, with the greedy mayor screwing the town over, and he's finally standing up to her friend and carving a path for herself. But we also know Anne still wants to fix things with Sasha from her attempt to save her. In the end, it was Sasha who made the call to fall, and not Anne's inability to hold on. Things are all changing from the political structure to the dynamics of the factions and groups. Everything is developing well, and things are staying consistent. Nothing has been lost so far, and it's all flowing smoothly. Around a week goes by, and the planters are preparing to leave for the capital, Utopia, where they hope to find answers on how to get Anne home. Once leaving, Hop Pop introduces his set of Hop Pop's road rules to ensure peak safe. However, it comes at the cost of the enjoyment of the trip. Fed up with being boxed in the wagon, they sneak out and try and go down to the Ruins of Despair, which turns out to be a long dormant robot factory. They end up stopping and using the giant Hop Pop's road rules book. However, this has the unintentional side effect of creating a sentient robot, which definitely won't come back at any point in the future. Meanwhile, at the other end of the continent, like right here, Sasha is trying to get Grime to be active again, in case someone tries to hunt him for his failure at Toad Tower. However, that's not what it's actually about. In reality, it's about not wanting to lose another friend. In all this arguing, they are being hunted by one of Utopia's top soldiers, General Yunan. Scourge is a Sandworth, defeater of Ragnar the Wretched, and the youngest Newt to ever achieve the rank of Grand General in the Great Utopian Army. They defeat her by fighting her weakness, her inability to not go.
Scourge of the Sand Wars, defeater of Ragnar the Wretched, the youngest Newt ever!
Anytime she has to say her name. After defeating Yunan, Sasha and Grime begin their plan for total control of Amphibia. Back with the planters, they are continuing to go from town to town. They're stopped by some rancid mini frogs that literally killed some big ass toads, a trip to the woods for food, a cedar heist crew, 2 conjoined own twins that can't stop fighting, the richest inner city in Amphibia where Wally's from, and literally just fucking Gravity Falls, but with frogs. After all that, they end up in Utopia, where Marcy and Anne reunite, and we learn that Marcy works directly for the king as the king's top advisor. Sprig, distrustful after the whole Sasha incident, doesn't immediately trust Marcy, but after Marcy saves Sprig's life and defeats the big ant queen, Sprig changes his mind real fast. Marcy and Anne still have things to work out, like it's the whole Sasha incident, Marcy being jealous of Anne's ability to make friends, Anne being jealous of Marcy's smarts, and eventually, they are invited to stay at the palace, which they're told the not evil king Anne gives them the basic rundown of his plans to figure out how to get them home. However, nothing real happens yet. This only is possible because the stones from the music box are dead. They're all grayed out, as you can see. Throughout the next few episodes, we get important character moments between the main cast. Dan and Polly have some fun Season 1 hijinks where they further bond. Brig gets accepted in college, which has always been Hop Pop's dream. However, Hop-Up can't let Sprig go just yet, and Sprig isn't ready for restrictions at school, so in the end, Sprig doesn't end up going to school. Hop-Up goes on a classic detective movie investigation to find his friend Sal, where he learns to not get stuck in the past, but instead adapt and bring the past with you into the future. Finally, Sprig and Ann go shopping for souvenirs, where, after a long series of events, Sprig and Ann bond over their relationships, or in Sprig's case, lack of a relationship with their parents. Both of them wish they could be with their parents in that exact moment, but for different reasons, and being separated by literal universes and Sprig's parents being dead, neither one of them can be. However, in the end, they embrace each other with a hug, and it's truly an emotional moment that gets me every time. The king has a message for them, where they have to wait until morning to hear it. They use this as an opportunity to have a sleepover, where Anne, Marcy, Sprig, and Polly all bond together for some dares. One of these dares included going down into the Forbidden Base, where they find some weird multiversal being called Shadowfish, as well as some other shit that just gives off general creepy vibes. After that, they get a message from the king, where they learn how to recharge the stone using the temple, and they also learn the location, the first one. It's the harvest coming up, and Hop-Up needs to dig up the music box. Retriever for contacts, they decide to head back to the village. Although Marcy, wanting Anne to stay, tells Anne that it doesn't make sense for her to head back to the village. After some troubled goodbyes, Marcy caves and eventually lets Anne go back with the planters. And she's a little troubled by it. And Andrea sees this as a time to manipulate Marcy. That was a lot, but we are now starting to see things move. Nothing new has been introduced, only forwarded, which is something that a lot of the shows we'll be looking at later definitely didn't do right. Yeah, I'm talking about you. For starters, Anne and Marcy have begun to work out their baggage. However, that doesn't mean all is well. For instance, Sasha is still mad at Anne for how Toe Tower played out, and she's been aggressively training. However, that's not to say that she doesn't care about Anne. She still calls her a friend when she talks about losing her, even if she's talking about losing her as a friend. Major issues are about to come out, especially with Andreas' manipulation and Hop-Up's lies. When they return to Wartwood, Hop-Up realizes that the box is gone. All while Anne watches. Furious that Hop-Up violated her trust, he returns to the cave. Hop-Up tries to explain his actions, but it isn't enough. While they temporarily make up, they still haven't fully restored their bond. There's still bad blood between the two, which comes up often during the first temple. It all comes to a head when they're put on separate teams in the big Harry Potter-like chess game, in which Anne says,
I don't know! I just need time. Look, I want things to go back to the way they were, but...
This even gets through to Marcy, who's been ignorant about this beef this entire time, and as such, she forfeits the game. This ends up being the right move anyways, as they recharge the stones and all three then return to Wartwood. At this point in the show, we're starting to see the core themes kind of merge together. Friendship evolves into forgiveness, and it's all encompassed under change. Now, you may be wondering where the greed part of that is, but that's going to come back later. It takes time to make amends, and it won't happen overnight, but that's alright. People change, and that's alright, and we see this idea appear more often from this point on. Finally, the robot from earlier returns. Polly ends up taking him in and went,
Wow. Well, this is going to be my personality for the rest of my life.
Meanwhile, with Sasha and Grime, they're campaigning for the assault on the castle to take control of Amphibia. This is where Grime and Sasha learn that Anne and Marcy are helping Andrea. Council of Toads, these three guys, including Beatrix, Grime's sister, and this guy's name's Aldo, could not tell you what this guy's name is. They all agreed to let them go through with their plan on the condition that they bring back the legendary weapon of Barrel's Warhammer. They agree, however, Percy and Braddock, the soldiers who have stuck with Sasha and Grime from the beginning, after the intensity of this mission, can't take it anymore, and they leave, and never come back. Going back to the main cast, they are working through the temple after some hijinks ensue in the village. At the second temple, Anne is constantly sticking her neck out for everyone. All of Valeriana, a character we met earlier but didn't do anything, is scolding her. It all culminates when Anne saves Valeriana after she nearly falls to her death, and Anne is deemed worthy of recharging the stone. During her friend's screaming, she pulls out the stone before it's fully charged, which definitely won't come back later, and tries to save them. But it turns out they were just watching funny videos. And can you really blame them? You see this shit? When they begin to prepare for the third and final temple, Anne, who's been wearing the same clothes since she got there, is forced into a makeover by Marcy. After countless tries and fails, Anne chooses to wear just the chest plate, which shows her growth throughout her time in Amphibia, as she has grown to love who she is as a person and really define herself. Reasoning that
I'm finally happy with who I see in the mirror right now. So whatever I put on, I just want to be able to see the same me looking back.
When they get to the next temple, it's all about strength. However, nobody's really suited for it. Then Sasha, who has been trailing them the whole time, reunites with them and helps them recharge the stone, while somewhat dealing with the baggage Anne and Sasha have. So now things are moving. Everything is together and baggage is seemingly being worked out, but as we will come to find out, Anne and Sasha have different goals. Anne wants to make up and reunite with Sasha and go home, whereas Sasha wants to use Anne as a way to take control. And while she still wants Anne to be her friend, she doesn't view friend in the same way as Anne. This is also where we see the themes of greed start to come back. The Toads are getting a little bit too greedy with their power and they're gonna come back to bite them in the ass. With all three of them in the village, they decide to use this time to bond and become closer. It seemingly works, and they're all closer than ever.
But then it all goes wrong.
When they return to Utopia, Sasha enacts her plan, but it's the last straw for Anne, and she completely loses all hope she had in Sasha. Sasha acts like she doesn't care, and even tries to send Anne home. However, she doesn't actually understand how the box works, and instead she just decides to send them. In all this chaos, Sasha finds out Andres is evil. Who could have seen that coming? And tries to stop Anne from freeing him. But because Anne no longer trusts Sasha, it doesn't go well, and Andres regains power. It's then revealed Marcy got them trapped there on purpose, and it all culminates in Anne getting powers from the half-charged stone. And she fights Andres after he drops Sprig out the window. Marcy saves Sprig, and because of Anne's fight, there's an opening for them to all escape. However, Marcy gets stabbed in the chest, leaving Marcy in a near-death state, Sasha and Grime having to escape, Anne and the planters on Earth, all while the box is in Andres' possession. Damn! There's still a lot of things that need to be worked out between the three girls, and they don't even know if Marcy's still alive. True Colors is a heart-wrenching moment after she reveals she got them trapped there on purpose, because you feel for her in the sense that she wanted to stay with her friends. And what came out of the adventure was good, as shown by her saying,
"But look at how much fun we've had! Look at how much you've both grown! Look at Sprig! I gave you this! I gave you everything!" I just didn't want to be alone.
But she isn't justified in trying to play God to keep her friends together. As well, Anne and the planters are now trapped on Earth with no easy way back, which also proposes the question of if they will be trapped in separate worlds by the end of the show. Sasha is also trying to change, as shown by her actions, but she just can't bring herself to do so. But as we come to see later, this is a key moment that pushes her forward. One more thing to note is that even though I joked about it a bit since it was heavily foreshadowed, Andres being a twist villain actually works really fucking well. He doesn't just turn into another character, he keeps his own personality and is still really evil. And while Andres is up to something long before that point, it's not fully revealed what he wanted to do until after the reveal. The show makes it seem like a Grinkle Stan type mystery, but when in reality it's actually something far more sinister. While the way I've told the story puts a larger focus on the overall story, the show's great structure really allows this plot thread to develop and breathe, and it ends up benefiting the show and Andres as a character in the long run. A few things happened immediately after the finale. In Amphibia, Sasha and Grime return to the Frog Village, where they claim they were sent by Anne. While there, Sasha goes through Anne's journal, regretting her actions and wanting to make amends, and a really touching and emotional moment that sets the tone right for the season. After being attacked, they come clean, and to their surprise, the villagers actually join their cause, forming the Wartwood Resistance. In the castle, things are progressively getting worse, as more and more resources are being used up and pollution is going rampant. Olivia, one of the highest ranking officials, has had it, and with the help of Yunan, tries to free Marcy. However, they fail, not only falling under mind control, but Marcy ends up getting merged with a being known as the Core, a collection of Amphibia's greatest minds. On Earth, Anne and the planters have reunited with Anne's parents. However, Anne doesn't want to tell them the political situation in Amphibia, Marcy's status, or that they plan to go back. This all comes to a head when Frobo, who was damaged during the assault on the castle, was repaired by Paul. This alerted the stealth robot who had been tracking Anne and the planters throughout their short time on Earth. This causes her to reveal everything to her parents, from her plan to go back to her power. Winding a bit, they begin to do more research on how to get back to Amphibia, and they find a vase with a depiction of a humanoid amphibian with it. However, it's in a museum. After getting caught trying to steal it, the person who runs the museum, Dr. Jan, actually helps them and discovers a message about the Mother of Olms when placed under a blacklist. Then, they find a scientist, Dr. Frey, who has discovered portal technology. However, they can't keep it open for long, nor can they decide the location. After Dr. Frey is revealed to be crazy, who could have seen that coming? Their assistant, Terry, turns on them and helps Anne and the planters escape. After some run-ins with the government and some crazy hijinks, the planters get caught and kidnapped by the government. Anne, her family, and the people that the planters have met throughout their short time of Earth all teamed up to break into the government facility and rescue the planters. They're successful, but the head of alien research, Mr. X, finds a tracker and tracks them to the makeshift portal. Anne uses her powers to both fight the government and open the portal, and they end up back in Amphibia. They then head back to the village, where they encounter Sasha, who Anne hasn't seen since True Colors. Sasha doesn't want to take control, which puts Anne in a weird position, but they eventually work things out when Anne realizes Sasha's actually making an effort to change, allowing them to work together and build their army. One of their missions was to find the Olms, or specifically the Mother of Olms, and when they do, she tells them the prophecy from earlier through stars and all that. And the days leading up to the final attack, where Andrews plans to finally invade Earth, minor characters from the first season start coming back and joining the army. While there's still conflict between the cast, this is their only hope. They do some bonding exercises, but it isn't until Anne gets furious and uses her powers that they truly begin to work together. Before they come up with a plan, Hop-Up discovers an old family ruin as the base for resistance is set up in the Planter family secret tunnel. There, they find a red note and a red cloak. They come up with a plan, however, when they enact it
all goes wrong.
Before they get to the music box, they have to defeat Olivia and Yunan, and after saving them, they explain that Marcy has changed. However, Anne and Sasha interpret it in the way they've changed, but it's far more sinister than that. When they try and take the music box, they are confronted by Darcy, Marcy, and the Core. She torments them and calls them out for their actions, and even demonstrates how they ignored Marcy's needs and wants, and practically caused the situation to get this far out of hand. This is where it all comes to a head, Anne and Sasha have fully made up now, and they're starting to realize the mistakes with how they're treating each other. They're also beginning to realize how poorly they treated Marcy, but they still feel like somewhat betrayed by her. It's also not helping that Darcy is reinforcing their mistake and even told them that.
Friend, don't be silly. You're not friends. Not anymore. In examining Marcy's memories, it's doubtful you ever were.
As well, their capture has completely scattered their army, although they have begun to tear down the caste system and restore unity to Amphibia, causing massive changes. The invasion of Earth begins, and our main cast, now consisting of Olivia, Yunan, Frobo, Polly, Hop Pop, Sprig, Anne, Sasha, and Grime, have to break free from their imprisonment. Using Frobo's laser eyes, they break the floor and escape, hopping on their cavalries for a safe landing. They then reunite with Anne's parents, now working with Mr. X and the government. They set up camp in their school, where Sprig begins to talk about how
The quicker we fix this mess, the quicker things can go back to normal.
and Hop Up explains to Sprig how things will never go back to normal.
Sprig, don't you think Anne needs to go back to her life after all this? Some things are bound to change. They always do.
Where Sprig follows up by saying,
Oh, Hop Pop, nothing will change. Anne will always be a big part of my life.
later in the day, the Herons who killed Sprig and Polly's parents show up. But after the Herons attack Anne's parents, they don't want a repeat of what happened the first time. So they step up and not only defeat the Herons, but tame them in the process. After this, Andres challenges Anne to a duel. At the same time, Sasha and Grime break into the castle, trying to get a shot at Darcy. This leads to Andres and Anne fighting, while Grime and Sasha fight Darcy in the castle. It all comes to a head when Anne is down. To get her back to the game, Mr. X uses government equipment to motivate Anne. However, Anne runs out of energy and is nearly defeated when Sprig steps in. Right before he leaves, however, he drops the empty red note, which Mr. X determines is a secret encoded message. Sprig takes it to Andres and reads it out, but not only confirms that the planters are relatives of Leaf, but also makes Andres emotional and stops him in his tracks. In the castle, Sasha is down and nearly killed, but then Grime steps in, losing his arm. When Darcy notices Andrew stops fighting, he takes control. This enrages Sasha, who cuts the connection between the core and Marcy, seemingly defeating him. I wanted to quickly pause here. This moment also shows us Sasha's growth as a character, as this moment is led on by Darcy taunting her, talking about how,
Hey, Sasha, as a fellow control freak, you'll probably really appreciate this.
but Sasha, who we just saw change over the course of the season, isn't taking this shit, and severs the connection between Darcy and the core, saying,
I am not that person anymore.
Meanwhile, Andres, touched by the letter, decides to stop fighting and opens up his armor, right as Anne delivers a big strike with her powers, nearly killing Andres and revealing his cyborg body. Heading back to the ship, they check to see if Marcy is alive and pour their hearts out to her. She wakes up and they make amends, and they all head back to Amphibia. When celebrating their victory, they notice the moon rapidly approaching Amphibia. Then, Mother Om appears, confirming it's a prophecy's time. She specifically pulls Anne aside to tell her,
The stones are strong, but they may not be enough to defeat the core. If things look bad out there, don't forget about the secret spell. Well, the stones are rumored to hold a hidden power, enough to defeat any foe. But summoning such power
Comes at a price.
the life of the user.
She takes that into account and heads back to her friends, where Valerian is with. She restores the powers to everyone, and as such, all three of them now have stone power. They go to fight the moon, which is revealed to be the core. Andrews decides to finally step up to the core, and specifically his father, and destroys his connection to the core, and helps the girls to defeat it. However, it isn't enough. Anne decides to use the power of all three stones to defeat the core. She explains she might die in the process, but saying,
Our whole lives, I've followed you two, counted on you, trusted you. Now it's your turn to follow my lead. Please, let me do this.
Bert tries to get her to stop, however he's too late and watches Anne destroy the core, as she dies in the process. Anne then wakes up in a sort of limbo, where she gets confronted by the creator of the stone, who tells her that she is the first person in all the millennia of the stone's existence to use them for good. The Guardian then offers her their position, however, Anne turns it down, saying she'd be better off when she has more time to grow. And the Guardian agrees and sends her back to the land of the living, with a way to return home, as the stones had been destroyed when Anne used their power. Anne, Sasha, and Marcy all say goodbyes, as the stones are only enough for a one-way trip, if even, and they all head home. Around a year later in Amphibia, Polly has grown into a frog. Amphibia has been rebuilt, and statues commemorating the girls have been placed all around. The caste system has been completely dismantled, and the political situation is better, although unclear. Although, looks like we're finally getting an update on that, so that's good. 10 years later on Earth, we learn that the friends still went their separate ways, despite everything that happened in Amphibia, which is normal. They were still friends, but they fell into different groups. Something I have experienced myself. All three of them meet up at Anne's job, where it's revealed she became a herpetologist who runs the frog exhibit at the aquarium. That's where the show ends. Yeah, there's more in some books and all that, but that's not important. The fact is the show had a plan from start to end and stuck with it and told a beautiful story. Every tiny detail was accounted for, built up to, and paid off. The calamity stone, the prophecy, the toxic relationship between the girls, literally everything was set up early on, which meant nothing felt like it was rushed or random. something that other Disney shows before and since have struggled with. They conveyed clear messages that anyone who watched the show could pick up, and went from a person who only wanted to take the easy route to sacrificing her life for the safety of everyone. Asha went from a brutish control freak to a good friend who would help others. Marcy learned to accept change and move on, and all three of them worked together to destroy the greed in Amphibia. And the overall story of the show was every character involved demonstrated that change can be difficult,
but it's how we grow. It can be the hardest thing to realize you can't hold on to something forever. Sometimes you have to let it go. But of the things you let go, you'd be surprised what makes its way back to you.
Amphibia is one of the most coherent stories I've seen in a while, and it's something that Disney has yet to pull off with most of their other shows. But of course, after talking good about a show for 30 minutes, the show isn't perfect. So, what went wrong? While I just spent a long time praising the show, there are definitely a lot of issues. Firstly, the first season of the show is easily the weakest, and at times it feels childish. Like many first seasons, it doesn't really reflect the show as a whole, and can be hard to sit through that very first time. As well, the third season is also a very divisive one, with many weird choices made throughout, such as stretching the Mother of Olm's plotline into 2 episodes, the fact that the mid-season finale was his Christmas special, and Sprite. However, ultimately, I don't think it mattered. Sure, season 1 had its rough moments, but it also had some great character moments too, with Sasha and Trey Tonio, even Domino too, and it's great character development for everyone. Not to mention nearly every episode plays a part in the finale. Well, season 3 has issues, sure, but they used their time almost a little too well. In fact, maybe they should have condensed it, but nothing feels wasted, to be honest, and I'd rather see them have too much time than have it not get enough time. And Spivey, yeah, I've got no defense for that one. Show is a 0 out of 10, video over. Yeah, but you can obviously just skip it. It's meaningless in the grand scheme of things, and it's only an 11-minute episode. Amphibia is a show that hit incredibly close to home for me. I've dealt with situations like Anne's friendship with toxic manipulative friends, but I've later made up with. It hits incredibly close to home, seeing Anne goes through the stages of seeing friends fight, sticking up for your true friends, as well as the multiple attempts to make up, because deep down inside, they were always your friend. As well, the change aspect of the show really hit hard, because things change. I've changed friends, I've changed schools, I've lost friends, I've reconnected with old friends. So much shit changes, and it doesn't all stay the same. The fact that the show had the balls to stick to its messaging and not have the characters go back at any time, something a specific other show really fucked up on. In my opinion, it truly solidifies Amphibia's place as one of the greatest animated shows of all time. Tune in next time where I cover the Owl House, and I already know that one's gonna be a real hot topic. The video faded. Oh, y'all were waiting for the meme. Alright, well, here it is.
I love it in Amphibia, so much adventure still to see. Hope nothing bad ever happens to me.